Okay, we're looking at the Korean War now. You're saying to yourself, didn't we just get out of World War II? For the love of Pete, we left in 45. We kill 450,000 Americans. We kill 30 million or 30 million people worldwide, and we're back into another war. Yeah, we are. 5 years later. The Cold War is started. Communism is alive in Korea. The origins of the Korean War were Korea was divided into the communists, that's the northern half of the country, and America occupied the southern half, and it was along the 38th parallel. The Korean War will start in June of 1950, and it'll last for 3 years. As I mentioned, I think a couple of the classes, it's an absolute bizarre event. The North Koreans are being supplied by China and the Soviets, and we are supplying very little to South Korea. And there's a report given out to MacArthur, MacArthur is the head general for the United States, a World War II hero. That it looks like the North are looking to attack, and the report is suppressed. No one takes it seriously, and lo and behold, North Korea will attack, and then it will be the United Nations that call for a resolution to go and help the South Koreans. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Again, it'll last for a little over 3 years. Korea is not strategically essential to the United States, but because it's on the heels of China, the fall of China and the Civil War, the environment inside that, the United States, makes this absolutely crucial that we will not give ground here. And the last thing that President Truman can be in 48, 49, 50 is after we lose China is to appear you're being soft on communism, especially when we get to the Cold War in the United States, and we'll take a look at McCarthyism and that. China had just recently fallen, as I made mention, to communism, and America needed to make a very, very strong statement, and so it was an all-in situation with Korea. But as far as what does Korea give us, yes, it's on the peninsula of with Asia or with China, so that strategically it's important. But as far as economy, as far as anything there, no, it doesn't give us anything. Surely not at the same level of China. So in June of 1950, the UN makes a resolution for us to go to war. We're a part of it. The crazy thing about it was that Russia, because the United States was still not recognizing China as a legitimate government, Russia gets mad. They leave the United Nations, and Russia is no longer on the Security Council, and a joint resolution passes to use American forces in China, or not, excuse me, in Korea. If the Soviets would have been there and not have left, any Security 5 Council, there's 5 members: the Soviet Union, United States, Germany, Britain, and France. I could be wrong. It's not Germany. I can't forget the 5th member. If any one of those 5 votes something down, then the resolution automatically was going to fail. But Russia had left, and so there was a vote between the Security Council. They unanimously said yes, we should. That went to the floor of the United Nations, and it was voted that we should go, and the United States was the largest participant. So what does war look like? North Korea's army is armed with Soviet tanks, and these are after World War II, where the Soviets and Joseph Stalin is building its military up, the United States is de-escalating, and we have very little assets over in Korea. The Soviet tanks are superior to our tanks by a long shot, and they're supplied again through Russia or through the Soviet Union and through China. North Korea will break through in June, and its army will go all the way over the border, quickly overrunning the South Koreans, and they will push them all the way down to the southern part of Busan, and this is the most southern part of the Korean peninsula. It looks like it's imminent. They're going to get beat. At the urging of the United Nations, and a past joint resolution, the U.S. forces did enter in June of 1950. The leader of the Allied forces was going to be, again, the World War II hero, Douglas MacArthur. Now, MacArthur and Truman don't ever get along. Truman can't stand MacArthur. MacArthur does have a large ego, but this report that I was telling you about that was estimating the North Koreans were getting ready to attack us. In fact, if I remember right, the Marines at this time only have some ridiculous number of Marines in reserve, like 8,000 Marines in reserve. You know, that's a high school football crowd. That's not the size if you want your military forces. So we're really caught on our heels when Korea will hit, and we'll have to mobilize and use our forces. And MacArthur will land with the U.S. Army and the Marines, and they'll hold on. They'll make a last-ditch effort at Busan. Then he will take his Navy, and he'll take the troops and go up to the north, and he'll make an amphibious assault up at Incheon, which is on the western coast of Korea. He will quickly encircle all of the North Korean army, and he'll crush them. He'll capture back the capital of South Korea, which is Seoul, and at the urging of the United Nations tells the United States, keep going north. So they'll get to the 38th parallel, they'll cross the 38th parallel, and they're in full swing, and we are pushing the communist North Koreans back and pushing them closer and closer to China. Afraid that the United States is getting too close to their base, the People's Republic of China will say, you better stop and not come any closer. And it's when the United States crosses the Eula River, they will attack back in October of 1950. So again, the beginning of war is June of 1950. We're almost knocked out right away, the South Korean forces. We land, we make a stand in the southernmost part of Korea at Busan. We'll go up with our amphibious assault group, and we'll make a landing in the western part and encircle at Incheon, and we'll encircle all of the North Koreans. We'll knock those guys out, and then we'll turn all forces north, and we get closer and closer after we cross the 38th parallel to China. China says, hey, stop, don't do this. And then October of 1950, the Chinese and that massive population will invade. Initially, they will push the United States back, and then it'll settle into a stalemate for the better part of 2.5, 2 3/4 of a year, and it won't go anywhere. There's a great debate as China does this as to why aren't we using nuclear weapons, and MacArthur is asking for that, and he's making it known publicly, and Truman does not like that. Truman does not like being bullied and told what to do. So those two are going to have a falling out. Finally, in 1953, a peace treaty will be signed that divided the country back up to essentially what it was before the war. The war was never officially signed as a peace treaty. There was a cease ceasefire, but there was never a peace treaty signed. So technically, today, Korea is still at war. And Mr. Kim Jong-un has repeatedly said this, same with his father, that he's going to attack, and he has done a lot of things. Lately, he's been pretty quiet the last 6-7 months. When it was all said and done, the United States had lost 54,000 American lives that were killed there, and we spent about $1 trillion in 1954. I don't know what that equates to today. One of the big things that came out of the war was MacArthur, who was this brilliant strategist, went against presidential orders and continued to do things that the President of the United States says don't do. And he's going against presidential orders. So finally, Truman, after repeated attempts to stop MacArthur, he's relieved of command in April of 1951. Well, most of America was on MacArthur's side, and there was talk of impeaching and getting rid of Truman because the move was extremely unpopular with Americans. The only support that Truman had was that the Joint Chiefs of Staffs did side with Truman and for saying he should not use nuclear weapons. And I think many would say that was the saving grace of why Truman is not impeached and taken out as being incompetent. And then it'll turn around, and years later, most Americans will say that Truman did the right thing with not using nuclear weapons in Korea. June of 1950 to winter of 1953. And to this day, we still have 37,000 American servicemen on the Korean border peninsula, there to defend the DMZ and the South Koreans. So there you have it. Pretty quick little lecture over Korea. And now we're going to take a look at a couple videos talking about a gentleman that was in the war, and we'll leave it at that. But the significance of Korea is strategically not so important to the United States, but after losing the Chinese Civil War and the nationalists and Chiang Kai-shek and his incompetency, America was not going to be tolerating us losing another war to the Soviets and to communists. So we made a stand there, and we're able to hold our own. And again, it shows that you can contain communism. So some sense it's a win, some sense it's a loss. And we'll leave it at there, and we'll visit with you more later.